$40,000 more out of fund balance than the previous. And to be very honest with you, we could leave the tax increase at 1.8, reduce the budgetary reserve to 2 million. You simply would have less of a budgetary reserve and we'd have the same number in fund balance. So it is correct that our fund balance is what the bond markets look at, but by cutting the budgetary reserve and cutting the tax rate, we would then have to reduce the fund balance by about another 3%. Almost, it would come out to almost 40% of our fund balance. I don't like spending a third of it. This year being an extraordinary year, I can live with the taking 1/3 of the fund balance to help balance the budget. And my issue is, like I said, we are calling for an additional $500,000 taken out of fund balance with this final budget than we did in the preliminary final budget. So we are already taking out more money than I would prefer to, almost $3.1 million. And with the future being what it is, having some fund balance rather than a diminished amount is just good financial planning. And I believe that the 1.8% tax increase really is not crafted to fund the budgetary reserve. So cutting the budgetary reserve doesn't cut what we are going to have to spend. And it would just, as I said, increase the amount of fund balance we would have to spend, and that's more than I would be willing to support. As I said, we're at just under 35% of the fund balance is scheduled to be spent. And that is really, like I said, higher than I would like to see spent, but it is consistent with last year when we budgeted roughly 1/3 of our fund balance toward the covering the budget shortfall. So I would not support a cut in the tax increase just to cut the budgetary reserve, which really has, as I said, budgetary reserve expense is hopefully not spent, and that's covered by what's left in the fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Ms. Fuller.
Thank you. Some board members here are the parents of children that have had the benefit of an East Penn education. I'm looking across the table at Mr. Rhodes. His children graduated from East Penn. Ms. Gannon, your sons graduated from East Penn. Mr. Richwine, your children graduated from East Penn, and mine graduated from East Penn. And Ms. Hyde and Mr. Stoltz, you also were East Penn products. And as Dr. Seidenberger said, we live in uncertain legislative times. And as I often say in my emails to our legislators, as they are discussing vouchers, as they're discussing charter schools, I often say I'm so selfishly glad that my sons had the benefit of an East Penn education at the time that they did, because it was superlative. Today, it is still a fine education, but I'm very concerned that the kind of motions like Ms. Gannon suggested will indeed erode the quality of education that Mr. Earnshaw's children will face, and all of the other 8,000 children in the school district. And if I'm reading this properly, the difference between a 1.8 increase in the tax rate and a 1.4 index cap is an annual savings of $13.29. Am I reading that properly?
Assessed property, what, $65,000?
A median home. So I don't think it's worth gambling our children's future for that amount of money. I, for one, am very pleased that through prudent administration and cooperative work between the administration, the board, the staff, that we've been able to bring in the budget that we have been asked to vote upon. And I, for one, will vote for no other.
Okay, Mr. Falcano, did you have your hand up? Okay. Ms. Hyde?
I'll make this fairly quick. I think it is actually very clever, and I really do commend Ms. Gannon for taking the time for the taxpayers to look into this opportunity. I heard Mr. Earnshaw say that, we had a lot of things that happened, and we, did a budgetary freeze, et cetera, and expenditures. And that was because of our great management. I honestly don't see our management going backwards. I continue to see them doing a great job like this. And I think that's what we expect at East Penn. And the $13.29, yeah, I probably spent that at Taco Bell this weekend, But it compounds. Every year, and taxes compound on top of each other. So that's where maybe I have a slight issue where we're like, $13 isn't a lot. Well, then maybe 300,000 to get our index, to reach our index would be fantastic for East Penn to reach. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not used our budgetary reserve ever.
As long as I've been here.
Okay, and how many years is that?
It's 4, but I think it's far more than that.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of making a statement in the sense that I think we can give back to the taxpayers a little here, and I really do commend everything that our teachers and the administration staff has done. Once again, I'm with Ms. Gannon. I'm not sitting here pushing for a 0% increase. I think that she made really valid points, and I would hope that some other board members wouldn't automatically shoot them down. Thank you.
You gotta wait till everybody's had at least one turn. What do you mean, Mr. Falcano?
I agree with both Rebecca and Elaine, this movement with 1.4 index rate. I really have a lot of faith in our administration. I know we've had many discussions with Dr. Seidenberger, and I've gained a lot of confidence in his ability to manage well the finances of this district. And he's been doing it ever since he came here. He's cut out a lot of ways, which could have led to even higher property taxes. I'm really very pleased, and with his staff, they're great. They've done a great job. And they've done a great job in getting it down to 1.8. I think we could just go a little bit more at 1.4. I think our experience is that we do have an understatement of fund balance, and we discussed this too. And it looks like it could be at least around $2 billion this year. And so that would be our fund balance we show is 8.8 million. It could be up around 10 million or more. So I think from that we can, we should be able to do what Elaine said, and still meet the things that people are concerned about. Education. I'd like to thank everybody that was involved in helping us reach the 1.8. Teachers, the custodians, the administrative assistants, and the administration, plus Dr. Seidenberger's staff. Mr. Clancy, and Ms. Leonard.
Okay. Anyone else who hasn't
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. I appreciate what Ms. Gannon is doing. She's always stood up to the taxpayers at every turn, consistently and with vigor, and I've always appreciated that. Just on a personal note, even though it's not necessary, it would have been nice to have had this shared with me before I got here tonight, just so I had a little more time to think about it, but that's not your responsibility, and I don't fault you for that. Right, and I understand. My concern is for the future. A 1.8% budget is an outstanding budget. 1.4 is certainly attractive. I am a taxpayer. And it would look nice to come in at what was set by the state. However, the inflation rate as of June 15th is 3.6%. You can't play a 1.8% game in 3.6% world forever. You can only do it for a while. And I have no faith in the state's desire to fund the public school system at any higher rate than it is now, and I expect that they will try to cut back on that. With that in mind, keeping your powder dry, or keeping as much money in reserve as possible for next year's unknowables makes fiscal sense to me. If I take the metaphor of the family, once again, we need to not put as much in our savings to pay for what we need today, and that can be true in an extreme situation. But if you have a choice, you do need to put as much in the savings as possible for the future. And that's something I try to tell my children about and the other youth that I work with is, if you can at all put money in the bank for the future, you should. I'm going to support the 1.8% budget, mostly because I'm fearful for the funding situation next year, and we need to be as prepared for that as possible. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Stoltz, you're the only person who hasn't spoken so far. Do you have anything to say? All right, I'll start with my comments, and then we'll go on to a second round. But first, I have a couple questions for Ms. Sertable, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium again. Sorry about this, but this is budget time. The first question I have involves the PSERS contribution this year. It went up significantly. Do you know how much it went up? Approximately, you don't have to be down to the last dollar.
Off the top of my head.
About 3%.
It went, I know the rate is 8.65%, it was like 4.78 this year, so it went up.
So that's, let's say, for quick calculational purposes, roughly 4% of salary. And our total salary is?
Our total salary is over 51 million, 51.7 million.
Okay, so approximately $2 million it went up in this year alone, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
I think there's some figures on there.
Yes, and then we get reimbursed for half of that, so.
So it's up $1 million. So this $300,000 we're talking about was subsumed in, would have been subsumed by any PSERS increase that had come through. In other words, we've absorbed that $1 million, and we're talking about saving $300,000. Okay, and for next year, what do we understand the PSERS rate is going to be?
I know it's going up significantly again, but I don't know the.
I think it's around 13%. Is that what you understand, Mr. Glancy? Yeah, more than 10. So we're going to have another sizable increase that we'll have to absorb, in a sense, several $1 million that will be partially reimbursed by the state. But again, we're going to be over $1 million probably in additional PSERS contribution next year.
Correct.
Okay. And the second line of question I have for you is I'm looking at the first sheet of the summary revenue expenditures and fund balance that we have at our places.